On a crisp autumn afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow across the bustling streets of the city. The air was filled with the scent of roasted coffee and freshly baked goods from nearby cafes. In this vibrant yet often indifferent world, a woman named Clara found herself walking down Main Street, her mind preoccupied with her daily routines. She was a kind-hearted soul, known for her gentle demeanor and compassionate spirit. Today, however, she felt an unusual tug at her heartstrings. Clara had just purchased a juicy cheeseburger from her favorite diner, the kind that dripped with melting cheese and was piled high with fresh lettuce and tomatoes. As she strolled along, savoring the first few bites, she caught sight of a man sitting on the sidewalk, hunched over and shivering despite the autumn sun. His clothes were tattered, and his unkempt beard framed a gaunt face that spoke volumes of hardship and despair. "Hey there," Clara called out softly, her voice cutting through the noise of the city. The man looked up, squinting against the light. His eyes were a deep shade of sorrow, yet there was a flicker of surprise when he met her gaze. "Hello," he replied, his voice rough like gravel. "What do you want?" Clara approached him, still clutching her burger. "I couldn't help but notice you sitting here. Would you like something to eat?" He hesitated, looking at the burger in her hand as if it were a precious gem. "You're offering me your food?" "Of course," she said with a warm smile. "I can't eat it all anyway. It's just going to go to waste." The man's expression softened. "Are you sure? I don't want to take something that's yours." "I insist," Clara replied, extending the burger towards him. "It's better to share than to eat alone." With a cautious yet grateful glint in his eyes, he took the burger from her hands. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." Clara sat down on the curb beside him, her heart swelling with empathy. "What's your name?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Tom," he said, taking a large bite of the burger. A look of pure bliss crossed his face as he chewed. "This is amazing. Thank you again, Clara." "How did you end up here, Tom?" she inquired gently, wanting to understand the man behind the eyes of hardship. Tom sighed, wiping a hand across his mouth as he set the burger down for a moment. "Life's been tough. Lost my job a few months ago and then, well, things just spiraled from there. I didn't think I'd end up here like this." Clara nodded, her heart aching for him. "I'm really sorry to hear that. It's so easy for things to go wrong, isn't it?" "Yeah," he replied, his gaze drifting to the ground. "One minute you're fine, and the next, you're just trying to survive." Feeling a surge of compassion, Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of water. "Here, you should drink something too." "Wow, you're really too kind," Tom said, taking the water with trembling hands. "Most people just walk by." "I believe we're all in this together," she said, her voice steady. "We shouldn't forget those who are struggling." Tom looked at her, a mix of gratitude and disbelief in his eyes. "You're a rare one, you know that? Not many people would do what you just did." Clara smiled, her eyes twinkling with warmth. "I just try to do my part. We all have our battles, and sometimes, a little kindness can make a world of difference." As they sat there, sharing that brief moment of connection, the noise of the city faded into the background. Clara felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that in a world often overshadowed by indifference, she had been able to bring a flicker of light into Tom's dark day. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the suburban neighborhood, Sarah sat on her porch, the remnants of her day lingering in the air. The burger she had shared just a week ago with the homeless man weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that her small act of kindness had somehow rippled out into the world in ways she couldn't yet understand. "Hey, Sarah," called out her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, a sprightly woman in her 60s, as she ambled over with her small dog, Max, trotting eagerly beside her. "How are you doing? I saw you out here the other day talking to that man. You know, the one on the corner." Sarah nodded, a soft smile spreading across her face. "Yeah, I shared my lunch with him. He seemed really appreciative." Mrs. Jenkins leaned against the porch railing, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "You know, it's not every day someone does something like that. You have a good heart, dear." "Thank you," Sarah replied, a hint of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I just thought he could use a meal. It was a small thing, really." Small things can make a big difference, you know, Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice warm and reassuring. I've always believed that. You never know how far kindness travels. Just then, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb in front of Sarah's house, the deep purr of its engine cutting through the evening calm. Sarah turned her head, her brow furrowed in confusion. Who could that be? She wondered aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Jenkins squinted in the fading light. I don't know, but it looks fancy. Do you have any idea? Before Sarah could respond, the car door opened, and a well-dressed man stepped out. He wore a tailored suit and polished shoes that glimmered in the twilight. He surveyed the street with keen blue eyes before striding confidently toward Sarah's porch. Good evening, he said, his voice smooth and commanding. Is this the residence of Sarah Thompson? Yes, that's me, she replied, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension bubbling within her. The man smiled, extending a hand. I'm David Hawthorne. I believe you met someone I know recently. Sarah's heart raced. You mean, the homeless man? Indeed, David confirmed, his expression earnest. His name is John. He mentioned your kindness to me, and I wanted to find you and express my gratitude personally. Oh, Sarah stammered, taken aback. I didn't do anything special. I just shared my lunch. David shook his head, his demeanor serious. It was more than just sharing a meal. You treated him with dignity, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. John has had a rough go of it, and your gesture meant the world to him. Sarah shifted her weight, her cheeks flushing with a mention of John's struggles. I'm glad he appreciated it. I felt compelled to help. David took a step closer, his eyes locking onto hers. That's the point, isn't it? Your compassion has inspired me. I run a small charity dedicated to helping those in need, and I'd like to invite you to collaborate with us. Collaborate? Sarah echoed, her mind racing. What do you mean? I believe people like you, who have a genuine desire to help, can make a tremendous impact, David explained, his tone earnest. We're looking for volunteers to assist in our outreach programs. Your kindness could inspire others. Sarah's heart swelled with emotion, but doubt crept in. I don't know if I'm the right person for that. I've never done anything like this before. David smiled, his confidence unwavering. You've already done something remarkable. Sometimes it just takes one person to spark a change. I can help guide you if you're willing. As the evening air grew cooler, Sarah felt a flutter of excitement amidst her apprehension. She glanced over at Mrs. Jenkins, who was watching the exchange with keen interest, her expression a mixture of approval and encouragement. Why not? Sarah finally said, her voice steadying. I'd be open to it. I want to make a difference. Wonderful! David beamed, extending his hand once more. Let's make this happen together. And in that moment, Sarah felt the weight of the world shift ever so slightly, as if her small act of kindness had set in motion a chain of events that could lead to something extraordinary. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emily sat on her porch, sipping a cup of chamomile tea. The events of the past week were still fresh in her mind, and she found solace in the quietude of the evening. Her thoughts drifted back to the moment she had shared her burger with a homeless man, a small act of kindness that had unexpectedly changed the course of her life. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered by the roar of an engine. Emily squinted into the fading light, seeing a sleek black Mercedes gliding up her driveway. Its polished surface gleamed as it caught the last rays of sunlight. She set her cup down, her heart racing with curiosity and a hint of apprehension. Who could it be? The car came to a smooth stop, and the driver's door swung open. A tall figure emerged, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. He adjusted his cufflinks and stepped onto the gravel, his polished shoes crunching softly beneath him. Emily watched as he approached her, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Good evening," he called out, his voice rich and inviting. "You must be Emily." Taken aback, she nodded slowly. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" He extended his hand, fingers long and elegant. "I'm Michael, and I believe we have a mutual acquaintance." Emily's brow furrowed in confusion. "A mutual acquaintance? I'm not sure I understand." Last week, while I was passing by the park, I saw you share your meal with a homeless man, Michael explained, his tone earnest. His name is Jake. You might remember him. He spoke very highly of you. Oh, Jake. Yes, I remember him, Emily replied, a smile creeping onto her face. He seemed like a really nice person. Nice is an understatement, Michael said, chuckling softly. That man has a heart of gold. You see, his life took a turn for the worse, but he hasn't lost hope. When I met him, he told me about your kindness, how you didn't hesitate to share your meal. Emily shifted in her seat, feeling a mix of pride and embarrassment. It was just a burger. I couldn't eat it all anyway. It was more than just a burger, Michael insisted, his eyes locking onto hers with intensity. It was a gesture that reminded him that there are still good people in this world. He told me about your conversation, how you took the time to listen to his story. Your kindness inspired him. What do you mean? She asked, her curiosity piqued. How did it inspire him? He has dreams, you know, Michael said, leaning against the porch railing, his demeanor shifting to one of contemplation. He wants to get back on his feet, start a new life. That little act you did sparked something in him, a desire to change. Emily felt a warmth bloom in her chest. I didn't realize it could mean that much to him. Michael nodded, his expression sincere. That's the beauty of kindness. It can ripple out in ways we never expect. After Jake told me about you, I felt compelled to reach out. I wanted to thank you personally for restoring his hope. Emily was taken aback by the magnitude of his words. I didn't do anything special. I just wanted to share my food. Sometimes, the smallest actions have the biggest impact, Michael replied, his voice softening. And I believe in showing appreciation. So, I brought you something. He gestured toward the car, and for a moment, Emily felt a flutter of anticipation. What do you mean? She asked, confusion knitting her brow. Michael smiled and pulled something from the back seat, a small, beautifully wrapped package. It's a token of gratitude from Jake and me. Open it. As Emily carefully unwrapped the package, her heart raced. Inside, she found a delicate silver bracelet, shimmering elegantly in the fading light. Etched into it were the words, "In kindness, we grow." She looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. I can't accept this, she stammered, overwhelmed by the gesture. I truly didn't do it for anything in return. Please take it, Michael urged gently. It's not just a gift. It's a reminder of the difference you can make. Every time you wear it, remember Jake's story and how your kindness spurred a change. Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Thank you. This is unexpected, to say the least. Michael smiled, a glint of warmth in his gaze. Just remember, the world can be a tough place, but your kindness is a beacon of hope. And who knows, maybe this is just the beginning of a beautiful journey for you and Jake. As they stood together on the porch, a sense of connection blossomed between them, a shared understanding of the impact that simple acts of kindness can have on lives. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, Sarah sat on her porch, reflecting on her day. The gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees lining her yard, creating a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. She had just come home from her shift at the diner, where she had a particularly busy day serving customers. But amidst the hustle and bustle, one moment stood out vividly in her mind: the encounter with the homeless man. Just a week ago, she had shared a burger with him, a simple act of kindness that had left her feeling warm inside. She could still see his eyes lighting up as she handed over the second half of her meal. "You sure you want to share?" he had asked, his voice gravelly and filled with surprise. "Absolutely," she replied, a smile spreading across her face. "I can't eat it all anyway, and it's too good to waste." Their conversation had flowed easily from there, with him sharing stories of his life on the streets and her recounting the mundane aspects of her job. He had laughed when she described the antics of her customers, his laughter infectious and genuine. It was a fleeting moment, but one that lingered in her heart. As Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind wandered back to that day. She could almost hear the man's voice echoing in her thoughts. "Thank you, miss. You have no idea how much this means to me." A soft humming noise broke her reverie, and she turned her head toward the street, squinting against the fading light. A sleek Mercedes-Benz was gliding down her quiet road, its polished exterior gleaming even in the dim light. She raised an eyebrow, curious about the car's presence in her neighborhood, which usually welcomed only humble vehicles. The car came to a halt in front of her house, and her heart raced. Was it a delivery? A neighbor? The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out, his tailored suit sharply contrasting with the casual atmosphere of the evening. He looked around, taking in the surroundings before his gaze settled on Sarah. As he approached, she noticed his confident stride and the glimmer of something familiar in his eyes. "Excuse me, is this the home of Sarah Thompson?" he asked, his voice smooth yet commanding. "That's me," she replied, slightly taken aback by his demeanor. "Can I help you?" He smiled warmly, extending his hand. "My name is Mark. We met a week ago." "Well, sort of." Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't think. I was the man you shared the burger with," he interjected, his eyes sparkling with recognition. "I just wanted to come by and thank you properly." Her mouth fell slightly open, the pieces clicking into place. You're him. Yes, and I can't express how much your kindness meant to me that day. It was a turning point, really, he said, his expression earnest. "Life on the streets can be tough, and your small gesture brought a light into my life that I hadn't felt in a long time." "I'm glad to hear that," Sarah said, her heart swelling with warmth. "I just did what felt right." Mark chuckled softly. "The thing is, after that day, I couldn't stop thinking about how someone like you would share part of their meal with a stranger. It inspired me to make some changes in my life." "What do you mean?" she asked, intrigued. "I realized that I wanted more than just to survive. I wanted to thrive," he said, his tone passionate. "So, I took some steps. I found a job, got myself cleaned up. And here I am, on my way to start a new chapter." "That's amazing!" Sarah exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over. "I'm really happy for you." "Thank you, Sarah. And to show my gratitude, I wanted to offer you something." He motioned toward the car, and her curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "Just a little something to say thank you for your kindness. I know it's not much, but I hope you like it." He reached into the car and pulled out a small, elegantly wrapped box. Holding it out to her, he added, "Open it when you get a chance. Just know that I'll always be grateful for that moment." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, and she took the box, her heart full. "You really didn't have to do this, Mark. Your success is already a gift. Kindness is a circle, Sarah. It comes back around," he replied, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "And I intend to pay it forward." With that, he bid her farewell, returning to the Mercedes that had brought him to her doorstep. As he drove away, Sarah stood on her porch, clutching the box tightly, a smile breaking across her face. The world seemed a little brighter, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the quiet suburban neighborhood, Emily stood in her kitchen, washing the last of the dishes from dinner. The rhythmic sound of water splashing echoed softly in the background, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the image of the homeless man from a week ago, his weathered face and grateful smile as she handed him half of her burger. It had been a simple act, yet it lingered in her thoughts, stirring a mix of emotions she couldn't quite articulate. Just then, a sharp honk interrupted her reverie. Emily wiped her hands on a dish towel and peered out the window. A sleek silver Mercedes glided to a stop in front of her modest home. She squinted, trying to discern who might be arriving unannounced. It was unusual for anyone to visit at this hour, especially without prior notice. Curiosity piqued, she walked towards the front door, her heart quickening with anticipation. As she opened it, she was greeted by a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, his hair slicked back and a pair of sunglasses perched atop his head. He stepped out of the car, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement, and approached her with an air of confidence. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, his voice smooth and charming. "I'm looking for Emily Johnson." "That's me," she replied, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Can I help you?" "Indeed you can," he said, removing his sunglasses and revealing a pair of piercing blue eyes. "My name is Richard Blake. I represent a charitable foundation that has taken an interest in your recent act of kindness. Emily's heart raced. My act of kindness? I'm not sure what you mean. Last week, you shared your meal with a gentleman named Tom, Richard explained, his tone earnest. That simple gesture of compassion has not gone unnoticed. It inspired a few of us at the foundation, and we're here to express our gratitude. Really? Emily was taken aback. I didn't think anything of it. I was just trying to help someone in need. That's exactly why we're here, Richard said, a smile spreading across his face. We believe that small acts of kindness can create ripples of change in our communities. And we want to reward you for yours. Emily blinked, struggling to process the information. I'm flattered, but I didn't do it for any kind of recognition. It was just a burger. Richard chuckled softly. Sometimes, the smallest actions have the greatest impact. We'd like to offer you a scholarship to a leadership program we sponsor. It's designed to empower individuals like yourself to make a difference in the world. A scholarship? Emily repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. You don't have to decide right now, Richard reassured her. But think about it. With your compassion and drive, you could inspire others to follow your lead. As she stood on her porch, Emily felt a swell of emotions. Gratitude, disbelief, and a hint of fear. What if she wasn't worthy of such recognition? Thank you for considering it, Richard continued, sensing her hesitation. We'll be in touch to discuss the details. Just know that your kindness has made a meaningful impact. With that, he stepped back toward the Mercedes, his gaze lingering on her. Remember, Emily, even the smallest gesture can spark something extraordinary. As the car pulled away, Emily stood rooted to the spot, the weight of the conversation settling heavily on her shoulders. The world around her felt both larger and smaller at the same time. What had started as a simple act of sharing a meal had opened a door to possibilities she had never imagined. She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart still racing. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new, something that could change not just her life, but also the lives of others. She took a deep breath, the scent of the fading day filling her lungs, and felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the quiet suburban street, Sarah stood at the window, her heart fluttering with anticipation. It had been a week since she had shared her burger with a homeless man, an act of kindness that felt small at the time but had ignited a series of events she could never have anticipated. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her thoughts swirling with curiosity about the man she had fed. Did he remember her? Was he safe? The soft rumble of an engine broke her reverie. She leaned closer to the window, her breath catching as a sleek, black Mercedes glided to a stop right outside her house. The car's polished exterior gleamed under the fading light, an unexpected contrast to the ordinary vehicles that usually lined the street. Sarah's heart raced as she contemplated who might be inside. Was it a friend, a neighbor, or someone else entirely? Moments later, the passenger door swung open, and a tall man stepped out, his tailored suit hugging his frame perfectly. He scanned the neighborhood before his gaze landed on Sarah's house. With a purposeful stride, he approached, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice smooth and confident. "Is this the residence of Sarah Thompson?" "Yes, that's me," she replied, stepping outside, her curiosity piqued. "I'm Mark," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "I believe we have a mutual acquaintance." "Mutual acquaintance?" Sarah echoed, shaking his hand, her confusion palpable. "Yes," Mark continued, his expression warm but serious. "I'm here because of the kindness you showed to a man named Jack last week." Sarah's heart sank momentarily at the thought of Jack. "Oh, I remember him. He was hungry and, well, I just shared my burger with him. Is he okay?" Mark nodded, a slight smile breaking through his serious demeanor. "He's more than okay. In fact, your generosity made quite an impression on him. He's been telling everyone about that moment. It sparked something in him, you see. He's been trying to turn his life around." Relief washed over her, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm so glad to hear that. I just did what anyone would do." Mark shook his head, his expression earnest. What you did was not just a simple act of kindness. It was a beacon of hope for him. He asked me to come and find you, to express his gratitude personally. Gratitude, Sarah echoed, feeling a mix of emotions. I didn't do anything special. On the contrary, Mark replied, leaning in slightly, his eyes locked onto hers. Acts of kindness can change lives. Jack was at a crossroads, and your small gesture reminded him of the humanity he thought he had lost. He was inspired to seek help, to find a job, and to get back on his feet. Sarah felt a swell of pride mingled with disbelief. Really? I had no idea. I just wanted to help. Mark smiled. Sometimes, that's all it takes. Jack wanted to do something for you in return, to show his appreciation. He sent me here with a token of his gratitude. Token? Sarah asked, intrigued. Mark reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to her. It's a letter, along with a little something that he hoped would brighten your day. Thank you, Sarah said, taking the envelope with trembling fingers. I can't wait to read it. Just remember, Mark added, his tone shifting slightly, kindness often comes back around in unexpected ways. As he turned to leave, Sarah called out, Wait, will I see Jack again? He paused, glancing back with a thoughtful expression. He's working hard to get back on his feet. If he has his way, he'll be reaching out to you soon. You've made a difference in his life, Sarah. With that, he climbed back into the Mercedes, and as the car pulled away, Sarah stood there clutching the envelope, her heart full. The world felt a little brighter, and she couldn't help but smile at the thought of another connection forged through a simple act of kindness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Emily stood in her modest kitchen, the tantalizing aroma of garlic and rosemary wafting through the air. She had decided to whip up a hearty dinner after a long day at work, her mind still lingering on the encounter she had had with the homeless man last week. It was a seemingly small gesture, sharing her burger with him, yet it lingered in her thoughts like a warm ember. Just as she was stirring the pasta, the sound of a car engine pulled her attention away from the simmering pot. The dull roar of an engine grew louder, and she glanced out the window, wiping her hands on a dish towel. To her surprise, a sleek, black Mercedes-Benz rolled up her driveway, its polished surface gleaming in the fading light. Emily raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. She was not accustomed to seeing luxury cars in her neighborhood. Moments later, a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit emerged from the vehicle. His hair was slicked back, and he wore designer sunglasses that reflected the last rays of sunlight. Emily's heart raced as she instinctively brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, unsure of what to expect. She had seen enough crime dramas to know that unexpected visitors could mean trouble. The man approached her door, his footsteps crisp against the gravel. Emily hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door just as he reached it. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "Are you Emily?" "Yes, that's me," she replied, her brow furrowing. "Can I help you?" "My name is Charles," he said, removing his sunglasses and revealing deep-set, piercing blue eyes. "I'm here on behalf of someone you met recently." Emily's stomach tightened. "Someone I met? I don't understand. Do you remember the man you shared your burger with last week?" he asked, his tone shifting slightly, as though he were gauging her reaction. Her heart sank as she recalled the man's weathered face, his grateful smile, and the way he had devoured the food as if it were a feast. "Yes, I remember him. He seemed very grateful." Charles nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "He was indeed. That man is more than he appears. His name is David, and he's been going through a rough patch. Your kindness did not go unnoticed." Emily felt a rush of warmth at the thought. "I didn't do anything special. I just wanted to share my food with him." "Sometimes, the smallest gestures can have the greatest impact," Charles replied, stepping closer, his expression earnest. "David is a successful entrepreneur who lost everything due to unforeseen circumstances. He's been trying to rebuild his life, and your act of kindness inspired him in ways you cannot imagine." Emily's mind raced as she processed his words. "But what can I do? I'm just an ordinary person." Charles chuckled softly. You underestimate the power you hold. David would like to meet you again, to express his gratitude personally. He believes that kindness begets kindness, and he wants to extend an opportunity to you. An opportunity? Emily echoed, her mind buzzing with questions. What kind of opportunity? David wants to offer you a chance to collaborate on a community project he's launching. Something that could benefit those in need, like he once was. He believes your heart is in the right place, and he wants to work with you, Charles explained, his tone sincere. Emily's heart swelled at the thought. I don't know what to say. This is all so unexpected. Just think about it, Charles said, handing her a business card. David would love to hear from you. He's waiting for your call. As he turned to leave, Emily called out, Wait, how did you find me? Charles paused, glancing over his shoulder. Sometimes, people in need have a way of connecting with those who are willing to help, even in the most unusual ways. Take care, Emily. With that, he climbed back into the Mercedes, and as it pulled away, Emily stood on her porch, the card in her hand, the weight of her small act of kindness suddenly feeling monumental. She gazed into the twilight sky, contemplating the unexpected path her life might take from this moment forward. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the woman, named Sarah, stood in her kitchen, stirring a pot of soup on the stove. The smell of vegetables and spices filled the air, a comforting aroma that wrapped around her like a warm blanket. She had always found joy in cooking, and tonight was no different. It was a chilly evening, and she wanted to prepare something hearty. Just then, her phone buzzed on the countertop, pulling her attention away from the simmering pot. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and picked it up. It was a message from her friend, Lisa. Hey, Sarah. Ready for our dinner tomorrow? Can't wait to see you. Sarah smiled, typing a quick response. Absolutely. Looking forward to it. I'll make something special. As she set the phone down, her thoughts wandered back to the encounter she had experienced just a week prior. She couldn't shake the image of the homeless man from her mind. She had shared her burger with him, a small gesture that had felt so right in that moment. Now, she felt a strange sense of connection to him, as if their brief interaction had left an imprint on her heart. With a sigh, Sarah turned her attention back to the soup, stirring it gently. Just as she was about to turn off the heat, a loud honk interrupted her thoughts. Puzzled, she walked over to the window and peeked out. A sleek black Mercedes was parked in front of her house, its polished surface gleaming under the streetlights. Sarah squinted, trying to see who was inside. The car door swung open, and a tall man in a sharp suit stepped out. His hair was neatly combed, and he exuded an air of confidence. Who on earth could that be? She muttered to herself, curiosity piqued. She watched as the man approached her front door, his footsteps echoing lightly against the pavement. With a quick glance at the clock, she realized it was a little after 7. She opened the door cautiously, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. Can I help you? She asked, her voice steady despite the unexpected visitor. The man smiled warmly, his blue eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Good evening. You must be Sarah. My name is David, he introduced himself, extending a hand. Sarah hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. Hi, David. What brings you here? David took a step back, allowing her to take in his presence. I know this is a bit unusual, but I wanted to thank you for your kindness last week. I was in town for a business meeting, and I saw you share your burger with a friend of mine, Jack. He spoke so highly of you. Surprised, Sarah's brow furrowed. Jack. I remember him. He was very grateful. David nodded, his expression earnest. You have no idea how much that small act meant to him. He's been having a tough time, and your generosity really lifted his spirits. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her. I just thought he looked hungry. It was nothing, really. David chuckled softly. Nothing. Sharing a meal with someone in need is a big deal. It shows compassion in a world that sometimes forgets to care. She stared at him, taken aback by his sincerity. Thank you, but I didn't do it for recognition. I just felt it was the right thing to do. Exactly, he exclaimed, his voice rising with excitement. "And that's why I wanted to reach out. I believe in giving back to those who give selflessly. I'd like to invite you to dinner tomorrow night, my treat. It would be a great opportunity to get to know each other better." Sarah blinked in disbelief. "Dinner? With you?" "Yes. I know it's sudden, but I think it could be good for both of us. Plus, I'd love to hear more about your work and your thoughts on kindness in our community." She hesitated, caught off guard by the offer. "That sounds interesting, but I'm not sure." David smiled reassuringly. "No pressure at all. Just think about it. I'll be in town for a few days, and I'd love to make a difference, just like you did for Jack." Sarah felt a mix of intrigue and apprehension. As he stood there, waiting for her response, she thought about the ripple effect of kindness and how one small gesture could lead to something unexpectedly wonderful. As the sun began its descent, casting a warm, golden hue over the suburban neighborhood, Sarah found herself standing in her small, yet cozy kitchen, staring out the window. The smell of sautéed onions and fresh patties wafted through the air, a comforting reminder of the evening meal she was preparing. She had decided to make burgers, a simple pleasure that brought her joy, especially on a Friday night. The memory of last week's encounter with the homeless man replayed in her mind. She had been sitting at her usual spot in the park, savoring a burger and fries, when she noticed him sitting nearby, his eyes weary and his clothes tattered. Without a second thought, she had offered him half of her meal, a small gesture that had seemed monumental at the time. "Here, would you like some?" she had asked, her voice soft. His face lit up with surprise, and he replied, "Are you sure? I don't want to take your food. It's just a burger. I can't eat it all anyway," she reassured him, her heart swelling as she handed him the portion. They had exchanged a few words, a brief conversation that shattered the boundaries of their worlds. As she stood there, lost in thought, the sound of a car engine rumbled outside, breaking her reverie. She glanced out the window and spotted a sleek, shiny Mercedes pulling up to her driveway. Confused, she wiped her hands on a kitchen towel, wondering if she had misread the situation. Who could possibly be visiting her at this hour? The car door swung open, and a well-dressed man stepped out, adjusting his tie as he surveyed the neighborhood. He looked around, his eyes settling on her house. Sarah's heart raced. Was he lost? Or maybe he was selling something. She decided to step outside, curiosity piquing her interest. "Can I help you?" she called out, her voice steady, though her stomach churned with nervousness. The man turned towards her, a smile breaking across his face. "Hello. You must be Sarah." His voice was smooth and confident, with a hint of charm that made her feel at ease. "Yes, I am. And you are?" she asked, eyeing the luxurious vehicle he had arrived in. "I'm David. I was in the area and wanted to stop by." "I believe we have a mutual friend," he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "A mutual friend?" Sarah echoed, puzzled. "I'm not sure I follow. Last week, I heard about your generous act in the park," he explained, his tone turning serious. "I'm here on behalf of someone who was deeply moved by your kindness." Her mind raced as she tried to piece together the connection. I don't understand," she stammered. "The man I shared my burger with? What do you mean?" David nodded, his expression softening. "Yes, the homeless man. He's been going through a tough time, and your gesture really touched him. He spoke highly of you and your kindness. It inspired me to reach out." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just being nice. It was a small thing," she replied, feeling overwhelmed by the unexpected attention. David continued, "You see, he wasn't just any homeless man. He was once a successful businessman who lost everything due to unforeseen circumstances. After hearing your story, I wanted to do something special to thank you for your compassion." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her stomach twisting in confusion. "You don't have to do anything for me. I just offered him some food." David smiled warmly. "But it meant more than you know. Sometimes, it takes just a small act of kindness to change someone's life. And that's why I'm here." He wants to show his gratitude in a way that might surprise you. Her mind raced with possibilities, a mix of curiosity and apprehension flooding her thoughts. What could this man possibly want to do for her? She stood in her driveway, the evening air cooling around them, uncertain of how to respond. "Can we talk a bit more?" David suggested, gesturing towards the porch. "I promise it'll be worth your time." Sarah hesitated, glancing back at her unfinished dinner before turning her attention back to David, intrigued despite herself. "All right, let's talk." As they walked towards the porch, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the neighborhood, the woman stood in her kitchen, the aroma of spices and sizzling meat wafting through the air. She had prepared a simple dinner, but her thoughts lingered on the unexpected encounter from a week ago. It was a warm afternoon when she had seen him, the homeless man sitting on the curb, his clothes tattered and his eyes weary. She remembered the moment vividly, the way he smiled as she offered him half of her burger, the gratitude that shimmered in his eyes. "Thank you, miss," he had said, his voice raspy yet filled with warmth. "You have no idea how much this means to me." She smiled back, feeling a warmth in her heart. "It's just a burger, but everyone deserves a meal." Now, as she washed the dishes, her mind wandered to the man. She wondered where he was now, if he had found a safe place to sleep for the night or if he was still wandering the streets. Just as she finished drying her hands, a loud engine rumbled outside, breaking her reverie. Curious, she walked to the window and peered out. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of her house, its polished surface glinting under the streetlights. The car seemed out of place on her quiet street, drawing the attention of a few neighbors who paused to watch. Her heart raced as she wondered who could be visiting at this hour. She opened the front door cautiously, stepping onto the porch. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a tall man in a tailored suit, his demeanor confident yet approachable. He adjusted his tie and glanced around, spotting her standing at the door. A smile spread across his face as he approached. "Good evening," he called out, his voice smooth and inviting. "Is this the residence of Ms. Sarah Thompson?" "Yes, that's me," she replied, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Can I help you?" He extended his hand, and she shook it, noticing the warmth in his grip. "I'm Daniel. I believe you met my friend last week." "Your friend?" Sarah echoed, a sense of intrigue washing over her. "Are you talking about the homeless man I shared my burger with?" "That's right," Daniel said, his eyes twinkling with appreciation. "His name is John. He's been through a lot, but he mentioned how kind you were to him. It inspired me to come and find you." "Oh," she said, feeling a flutter of emotions. "I just did what anyone would do. I couldn't just walk past him." Daniel nodded, clearly impressed. "That's the spirit. What you did meant more to him than you can imagine. He's been trying to get back on his feet, and your act of kindness gave him hope." Sarah's heart swelled, but she remained cautious. "I'm glad to hear that. I just wish I could do more." Daniel's expression turned earnest. "Actually, that's why I'm here. John is staying at a shelter now, and he's working hard to get a job. He's determined, but he could use some help along the way. He mentioned that you have a knack for writing, and he thought you might be able to help him with his resume." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. "I would be willing to help him with that. But how did you find me?" "I have my ways," he said with a playful grin. "I wanted to thank you properly. You see, John is like family to me. We grew up together, and when he fell on hard times, I promised to help him." Your kindness sparked a renewed sense of purpose in him. Feeling a surge of warmth, Sarah replied, "I'd love to meet him again. It would be great to see how he's doing." "Perfect. How about we set up a meeting?" Daniel suggested, pulling out his phone. "I can coordinate with John, and we can all sit down together." As they discussed potential times, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just a simple thank you. It felt like a turning point, not just for John, but for herself as well. There was a world beyond her daily routine, one filled with stories waiting to be heard and lives waiting to be changed. And it all started with a simple act of kindness.